Hi, friends. I'm Scott Giles, a consulting hypnotist and a life coach, and welcome to Saturday at 2:30, the video podcast I shoot here on Facebook Live every Saturday at 2:30 Central, and later putting up on my YouTube channel. Today, I want to talk about perfectionism and the art of being imperfect. And I'm proud to say I have that art down. Now, this idea, the theme comes from the bullet journal by writer Carol. That is the method of self-reflection I use. He has a whole chapter on imperfection in his book, and I'm starting with that and then adding to it a considerable amount of material of my own. Writer starts off his chapter on imperfection with a quotation from Leonard Cohen, who happens to be one of my favorite musical performers. And Cohen wrote, "There is a crack in everything. That is how the light gets in." This reflects a similar quotation that I know from Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was once a minister of my own denomination. And Emerson wrote that there's a crack in everything God has made. And both of these thinkers were pointing to the reality that nothing actual can be perfect. There is an imperfection in everything, and that is the way it should be. The problem is that far too many people strive for perfection, and that can't possibly work. But the notion that perfection as a person could be achieved is an old religious notion. We even find a remnant of it in my own theological past in the Unitarian Universalist communities. They had a notion once upon a time called the infinite perfectibility of the human community. By which they meant that maybe we weren't perfect now, but with effort, we would eventually be able to become perfect, or at least better. If they had stopped with the better, they would have been okay, but they put that word perfect in there, and that was a problem. In Scripture, we see this in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, verse 48. "Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect." And this is one of the places in Scripture where, for a variety of interesting textual reasons, people get really messed up. They think it's a counsel to be perfect, not to make mistakes, to do everything perfectly, and that's not possible. Perfection is a fallacy. It can only exist in the realm of mathematical forms or definition. The ancient Greek philosopher Plato, his idea of the universe was that in some realm there were the forms. These were the pure shape of every concept, of every object, and the forms were perfect. But as the forms kind of radiated outward into time and space, increasing levels of noise or imperfection became part of those forms until now, in the realm in which we dwell, everything is flawed. Well, Plato was actually correct about this. Let me give you an example. Let's try to define a perfect circle. Well, mathematically, we can do that. We can write a formula for a perfect circle. But can we actually create a perfect circle? No. No matter how much you try, even if you have a computer draw a circle, what you end up with will be, to some degree, imperfect. The paper or surface on which the drawing occurs will have to have a texture, or the ink wouldn't stick. That texture is going to cause things to leach out. Therefore, it won't be a perfect circle. Or the nib of the pen you use will wear down, even minutely. Even if it's a brand new nib, if you use it at all, it will start changing, and you will not have a perfect circle. The perfect circle can exist in the realm of the idea only. It cannot be made manifest. Let's take something like a kilogram. Now, I'm going to read this because I want to be sure I get the exact names right. But in 1889, the standard of the kilogram was decreed. It was a solid cylinder equal in height to diameter, made of platinum iridium alloy. And this standard kilogram was put in the International Bureau of Weights and Measurements in Servais, France. However, in 1989, it was discovered that the prototype kept at Servais was 50 micrograms lighter than the other copies of it, which were made at the exact same time on the exact same equipment. Just oxidation, exposure to cosmic radiation, the accumulation of dust, the copies had begun to change. So finally, they abandoned the idea of defining the kilogram by a physical object, and they proceeded to come up with a mathematical formula, which was to define it in accordance with the Planck constant. And if you understand how that works, you're farther ahead in physics than me. Although I can tell you that a kilogram is defined equal as 6.62607015 times 10 to the minus 34th joules per second, Planck's constant. Nothing that actually exists can be perfect. Therefore, the attempt to be perfect in your moral behavior, in your physical behavior, in your social behavior is inherently flawed. It can't do it. It can't be possible. But we try. Fear of rejection or disapproval as we're growing up. Some people have an obsessional compulsive disorder, which tortures them with anything that isn't, to their mind, perfect. Being raised in a family environment where nothing was ever good enough. This was my situation. No matter how much I achieved, there was always a critique attached to the family's review. This causes one to be fundamentally insecure. And because it is impossible to actually be perfect in the instantiated realm of time and space, people attempting to be perfect end up as fakes. Because perfection can't be achieved. And therefore, all one can do is to pretend to be perfect by concealing one's imperfections and trying to appear as other than as one actually is. And the harder you do this, the more you know inside of yourself that you're a spiritual fraud, that you're a hypocrite, because you know you're not perfect, even if you fooled everyone else. And it isn't possible to be perfect. There's a crack in everything God has made, including me and including you. And that's a good thing, because that crack, as Cohen says, lets the light in. It gives us the freedom to exist in the world of space and time. There's an old saying that the perfect is the enemy of the good. And I absolutely agree with this. If you try to be perfect, all that happens is you find yourself paralyzed. You're afraid to attempt to do anything because you're afraid it will be less than perfect. And that paralysis causes you to defeat yourself. It is a self-defeating behavior. Now, of the traits that I have, one of the most saving traits has been that I can learn from my experience. I was raised in an environment where they did everything to try to convince me to strive for perfectionism, in part because they wanted me to fail, and that's a good formula for that. But I realized that whenever I tried to be perfect, I ended up not succeeding and, in fact, worse off than I was before I'd even began. But I did want to achieve. So I realized that the path to effectiveness was to stop trying to be perfect. Instead, I try to be imperfect. I can't be perfect, but I can be imperfect with my eyes closed. I've got that one down. For a while, I had on my desk an index card in which I had typed, "Done is good." If I needed to get something done, just get it done. No matter how effectively it was done, just get it done. If it was done, it was good, and far better than not getting it done because you were torturing yourself trying to get it to be perfect. I realized that if my output was simply reliably good, even if far from perfect, that would put me so far ahead of the rest of the pack that I would have a good and effective life. And that's been true for me. And I hope it can be true for you. I want to leave you with a quotation by the humorist Ashley Brilliant, who wrote, "I may not be perfect, but parts of me are excellent." And that's true. We may not be perfect, but we all have excellence. We can all strive to be better, and that's fine. But knowing that perfection is an unobtainable goal by definition, and therefore it's a fool's errand. You know what a fool's errand is? It was a form of hazing back in the 18th, 19th century gentleman club. When a new person was inducted into the club, they would give you a burlap sack or bag and take you out in the field, and your job was to pick up the nesting snipe birds that were in the field. And so you were left in the field and everyone else went away, and they said they would try to drive the snipe to you, and then you would net them and put them in the bag. Of course, this was a joke. They all went back and went drinking, and you were alone in the field holding the bag, and that's where that phrase comes from. So it was a fool's errand. It couldn't be done. It was done to fool you. Trying to be perfect is a fool's errand. Don't run that errand. Hey, thank you very much for your attention today. I'll be back next Saturday with another talk about a different topic. If I can be of help to you, please feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to hear from people. If there's a particular topic you'd like me to take up in these talks, I'd appreciate knowing that too. Please use the comments or email me or contact me through my website. We do also maintain a Patreon channel for those who want a deeper involvement with my work. Check that out too. Thank you much. Do well and stay safe.